Rounding to decimal places with adamonlinetutoring. Here are the beginner questions, some of the easiest questions that you're likely to find on this topic. For the first question, we're rounding 4.6999 to one decimal place. The first decimal place is the one immediately after the decimal point. So rounding to one decimal place, I need to put my rounding line after this digit. I then need to look at the number immediately after the rounding line and decide whether this is 5 or more. If it is, which in this case it's 9, I round up by adding 1 to the number before the rounding line, which is in my first decimal place, and everything after the rounding line will turn to zeros. So this can be written more simply as 4.7. Next, I'm rounding 0.0424 to 2 decimal places. That means my rounding line needs to go after the number in the second decimal place, which would be this 4 that I have here. Looking at the next number and deciding whether it's 5 or more, which in this case it isn't, means I need to round this number down. So it becomes 0.0, and when rounding down, you don't subtract 1 from the number before the rounding line. It just stays the same, and everything after the rounding line will turn to zeros. So the final answer would be 0.04. Lastly, I'm rounding 13.68543 to 3 decimal places. My rounding line will need to go after the third decimal place, which is this 5. Looking at the next number and deciding whether it's 5 or more, which it's not, so I'll need to round this number down to 13.68500, which gives me a final answer of 13.685. On to the intermediate questions with a slight increase in difficulty. 8.96 is being rounded to 1 decimal place, so putting my rounding line after the 9 and looking at the next number, I can see that it is 5 or more, so I'll need to round up by changing the 9 to a 10. So putting down my units, I'll need to carry a 1 over into the next column, meaning my final answer will be 9.0 or 9. For the second question, I'm rounding 0.007 to 2 decimal places. My rounding line goes after this digit, and deciding whether the next number is 5 or more means I will round this number up to 0.01, and this will give me my final answer of 0.01. Lastly, I'm rounding 11.399627 to 3 decimal places. This 9 is my third decimal place, so put my rounding line afterwards. And looking at the next number, I can see that this is 5 or more. So rounding up to 11.39 and then adding 1 to the next 9 would become 0. So I need to add 1 to the next column, which will turn this to a 10, and add 1 across to the next column. So my final answer would be 11.4. On to the advanced question, one of the trickiest questions that you're likely to find on this topic. A number, when rounded to 2 decimal places, is 0.40. Write down the smallest possible value of the number. So when rounded to 2 decimal places, my rounding line would have to go after the second digit beyond the decimal point. To find the smallest possible value, I must have rounded up to give me 0.40. So that means I must have added 1 to the number before the rounding line. I can't take away 1 from 0, so I'll need to change this into a 10 by stealing 1 from here. This will change this 4 to a 3, and where I now have 10, I can take away 1 to give me 9. And the smallest number after the rounding line, which would have caused me to round up, would be if I had a 5. So my answer is 0.395. Here are some questions that I've completed. It appears as though I've made some mistakes. See if you can pause the video and tell me what they are or make some corrections in the comments below. Thanks for watching. If you found that video useful, don't forget to hit the like button and leave a comment. If you're struggling with topics or finding maths difficult, subscribe and turn on notifications to receive regular updates about new video tutorials and other useful content. You can visit and follow all of my socials by clicking the links in the description below.